Everyone in the exam hall thought Grace was alone, but someone they couldn't see was helping her. Grace did not know that this moment would change her life forever, and what she discovered later made her freeze in fear. Grace Williams always sat at the back of the examination hall, not because she wanted to hide, but because life had taught her early that the world rarely saved seats at the front for girls like her. The wooden desk creaked each time she shifted her weight, its surface scarred with years of nervous tapping and carved initials from students who had passed through and moved on. Around her, the hall buzzed with anxious breaths, whispered prayers, and the scratch of pens testing ink. Grace's hands trembled slightly, not from fear of failure alone, but from the memory of how she had arrived at this moment, with no mother, no father worth mentioning, and no one waiting outside the gate to ask how she did. Outside the school walls, harmattan dust hung in the air like a reminder that nothing in life stayed clear for long. Grace swallowed hard and stared at her question paper, the words swimming before her eyes. It wasn't that she hadn't studied, she had. She studied under flickering lantern light, after selling sachet water by the roadside, after washing plates that were never hers. Still, doubt clung to her like a stubborn shadow. As she closed her eyes briefly, a strange warmth brushed her shoulder, soft, familiar, and impossible. Grace stiffened. The hall was silent, yet she felt it clearly. Someone was there. Grace did not turn immediately. In Nigeria, children are taught early that some things must be respected before they are understood. The presence behind her felt like palm wine mixed with incense, like evenings spent under mango trees listening to stories that ended with warnings. Slowly, she lifted her head, and in the corner of her vision, she saw a glow, faint at first, then steady. A woman stood behind her, wrapped in white fabric that shimmered like moonlight on river water. Her face was gentle, lined with wisdom, and her eyes held a sadness Grace recognized even before memory caught up. "Mama," the word escaped Grace's lips without sound. The woman smiled, placing a glowing hand on Grace's shoulder, and suddenly the hall felt smaller, safer. Grace's mother had died 10 years earlier, leaving behind unanswered questions and a house that echoed too loudly at night. Yet here she was, not as Grace remembered her in sickness, but as she had been in stories, strong, radiant, unbroken. The woman did not speak, but Grace felt her voice in her chest, steady as a talking drum. "You are not alone, not today." Grace's mind drifted backward to the day her mother was buried in their village in Ogun State, the red earth staining her black dress as she wept until her body could no longer produce tears. Elders had spoken in hushed tones, warning her not to cry too loudly, lest she disturb the spirits. Her aunt had pulled her aside then and whispered, "Your mother was not an ordinary woman. Blood like hers does not forget its own." At the time, Grace was too young and too broken to ask what that meant. Now, sitting in the exam hall with her mother's presence wrapping around her like a shawl, Grace remembered something else. Her mother's last words. "No matter how far I go, I will answer you if you call with courage." Grace's fingers tightened around her pen. The questions on the paper suddenly looked different, clearer, as if someone had lifted a veil. Her heart pounded, but this time it was not fear, it was recognition. Grace began to write, not quickly, not carelessly, but with a confidence she had never known. Each answer came like a story unfolding, one memory unlocking another. When she hesitated, the glow behind her pulsed softly, like a heartbeat reminding her to breathe. She remembered her mother teaching her numbers using groundnuts, counting them carefully before roasting them by the fire. She remembered spelling words aloud while pounding yam, her mother correcting her gently between strokes of the pestle. Across the hall, a teacher glanced up, frowning slightly as if sensing a shift in the air. Grace did not notice. She was too deep in the rhythm of writing, too focused on the strange harmony between her thoughts and the unseen guidance behind her. time stretched and bent. The bell rang once, then twice, and still Grace wrote, her pen moving as though guided by more than muscle and ink. When Grace finally put down her pen, the hall was nearly empty. Chairs scraped as invigilators stacked papers, and the afternoon sun slanted through the windows, casting long shadows. Grace looked up, suddenly aware of how quiet it had become. She turned, heart racing, but the glow was gone. The space behind her was empty, cold even. Panic rose in her throat until she felt it, a warmth in her chest, steady and reassuring, like a hand resting over her heart. Outside, students gathered in excited clusters, comparing answers and boasting loudly. Grace walked past them, her steps slow and careful, as though the ground might disappear beneath her feet. At the school gate, she paused, half expecting to see her mother waiting, arms open. Instead, there was only the road home and the familiar ache of reality. Still, something had changed. She could feel it in her bones. That night, Grace dreamed of drums. Not the kind played at festivals, but deep, ancient drums that spoke in rhythms older than words. She stood in a clearing, surrounded by women dressed in white, their faces hidden, their feet bare against the earth. In the center stood her mother, holding a calabash filled with water that reflected stars Grace had never seen before. "Your journey is only beginning," her mother said at last, her voice echoing like thunder, softened by distance. "The world will test you again. Remember who walks with you." Grace woke with a start, sweat cooling on her skin, the echo of drums still ringing in her ears. Outside, a rooster crowed too early, and the night retreated reluctantly. Results were posted 2 weeks later on a cracked notice board near the principal's office. Grace almost didn't go. Fear wrapped around her like a familiar enemy, whispering that hope was dangerous. But something pushed her forward. When she reached the board, she scanned the list slowly, her finger tracing names until it stopped. Grace Williams, first position. The world tilted. Students gasped, teachers murmured, and somewhere in the crowd, someone laughed in disbelief. Grace stepped back, heart pounding, tears blurring her vision. She did not scream or jump. She simply stood there, stunned by the weight of it all. That night, she lit a candle in her small room and whispered, "Thank you, Mama," into the darkness. Success is loud, but jealousy is louder. Rumors spread quickly, twisting Grace's achievement into something suspicious. Some said she had cheated. Others claimed she was using village power. Teachers watched her more closely now, their praise tinged with caution. Grace felt the shift immediately, the way smiles became forced and conversation stopped when she entered a room. One afternoon, the vice principal called her in, his office heavy with the smell of old books and authority. He asked questions that danced around accusations, his eyes sharp. Grace answered calmly, though her hands shook. As she spoke, she felt it again, that familiar warmth, steadying her voice, grounding her spirit. When she left the office, she knew the real test had only begun. Grace's aunt warned her to be careful. "In this world, people fear what they cannot explain," she said, stirring egusi soup slowly. Grace nodded, understanding too well. Nights grew heavier, filled with strange dreams and distant voices. Sometimes she felt watched, other times she felt protected. One evening, as rain hammered the zinc roof, Grace heard a soft knock on her door. No one was there when she opened it, but on the ground lay a single white feather, clean despite the mud. Grace picked it up, her heart racing. She did not need anyone to explain its meaning. A regional competition was announced, one that could change lives. Grace was selected to represent her school. The pressure was immediate and crushing. This time, it wouldn't be enough to pass quietly. Eyes would be watching. Expectations would be sharp as knives. The night before the competition, Grace sat alone, staring at her books. Doubt crept in again, heavier than before. "Mama," she whispered, unsure if she was asking for help or forgiveness. The air shifted, the candle flame steadied, and though no figure appeared, Grace felt courage rise within her, slow and unyielding. At the competition hall, as contestants took their seats, Grace felt it, the distant rhythm of drums, faint but persistent. Her heart synced with it, each beat reminding her of where she came from. Questions came fast, complex, unforgiving. Grace answered them one by one, her mind sharp, her spirit unbroken. Midway through, a sudden blackout plunged the hall into darkness. Gasps echoed, panic rising. In the dark, Grace closed her eyes, breathing deeply. The drums grew louder, clearer. When the lights returned, she was calm, centered, ready. She finished strong. Grace won. The announcement was met with thunderous applause and stunned silence in equal measure. Cameras flashed, hands shook hers. Opportunities opened like doors she never knew existed. But with victory came consequence. The whispers grew darker now, edged with fear. That night, Grace dreamt again of her mother, standing at the edge of a river. "Power is not the enemy," she said. "Fear is." Grace woke with tears on her cheeks, understanding finally settling into her bones. Years passed. Grace grew into her name, earning scholarships, traveling beyond borders she once only imagined. Yet she never forgot where she started. She returned often to her village, sitting with elders, listening to stories, learning the balance between the seen and unseen. Sometimes, late at night, she felt that familiar warmth. She would smile, whisper a greeting, and continue walking her path, steady and sure. Children gathered around Grace whenever she visited home, their eyes wide with curiosity. They asked her how she succeeded, how she survived. Grace would laugh softly and tell them, "I listened, I worked, and I remembered who loved me first." She never denied the spiritual, nor did she exaggerate it. In Nigeria, truth often lives quietly between words. When Grace lost her aunt, grief returned like an old companion. At the funeral, as prayers rose into the sky, Grace felt her mother's presence stronger than ever. 2 hands on her shoulders, 2 voices in her heart. She wept freely this time, knowing grief was not weakness, but love refusing to disappear. Grace started a foundation for girls like her, girls who studied under lantern light, who carried grief and hope in equal measure. She watched them grow, succeed, stumble, and rise again. Each success felt like a drumbeat echoing into the future. On the night before her mother's remembrance anniversary, Grace dreamed of the clearing again. The women in white smiled now. Her mother stepped forward, pride shining in her eyes. "My work is done," she said gently. "Yours continues." Grace woke with peace in her heart. For the first time, she did not feel the warmth immediately. Instead, she felt something stronger, herself, grounded, whole. She stepped into the morning light, ready. Though the drums faded, their rhythm remained in Grace's steps, her choices, her courage. She became a story others told, a quiet legend of resilience, love, and unseen guidance. Not magic, not myth, memory. And so, the girl who once sat at the back of the exam hall walked boldly at the front of her life. Not because she was never afraid, but because she was never alone. They say the dead do not leave us. They simply change the way they walk beside us. Thanks for watching. If you find this story interesting, please do well to engage with every of our stories here. Subscribe, like, share, and comment on our YouTube channel. Your support means a lot to us. Till we meet again next week Friday with another amazing African folktale story.